Yuki Tsunoda finished 11th at the Dutch Grand Prix. No points, no podium, no huge headline result. But for a driver who had not raced since Abu Dhabi last year, had never driven one of Formula One's new 2026 cars in anger, and was thrown into a sprint weekend at very short notice, that 11th place might have meant far more than it first looked. Because this was not really about 1 point, it was about whether Yuki Tsunoda could remind the paddock that he still belongs on the Formula One grid in 2027. And after Zandvoort, I think he has at least made that conversation harder to ignore. Let's start with how this happened, because it was a strange chain of events. Isaac Hadjar injured his wrist during the summer break and could not race for Red Bull. Liam Lawson was moved up from Racing Bulls to cover for him. That opened Lawson's Racing Bull seat, and Red Bull called Tsunoda, their reserve driver, to fill it. Tsunoda had been preparing for a call like this. He had simulator work and some testing in older machinery, but that is not the same as racing a current Formula One car. He had not driven the 2026 package in a Grand Prix weekend, and these cars have different brakes, different aerodynamics, and much more complicated energy management than the cars he last raced. He said it himself, "Everything feels like I'm a rookie. That is why the weekend needs context." Tsunoda had one practice session before sprint qualifying. In that session, he was still learning the car, the tyres, the button settings, and the deployment. Then he put the Racing Bulls 12th on the sprint grid, only 9,000ths of a second away from Lawson's effort in the same part of qualifying. For Grand Prix qualifying, Tsunoda reached Q2, went 8th in Q1, and finished 12th in Q2, just 0.102 seconds behind full-time teammate Arvid Lindblad. Lindblad had driven the 2026 car all season. Tsunoda had just arrived. It showed how quickly he was adapting. Then came the race. Tsunoda finished P11. He did not score, and we should not pretend he did. Pierre Gasly got the final point in P10 after getting ahead late in the race. But Tsunoda was in that fight. He beat Lindblad, and he stayed calm through a messy Grand Prix. Afterwards, Tsunoda said, "Honestly, I think I was able to progress faster than I expected. I drove only 4 times out of 8 months since last year in Abu Dhabi, so with that, I did pretty well." That is a fair assessment. It was not a magical comeback. It was a very solid audition. And that word matters. Audition. Tsunoda knows he is trying to sell himself for a 2027 drive. Before the weekend, he explained that talking to teams can only do so much. A driver needs to prove himself on track. At Zandvoort, he got that chance. He also gave a pretty clear message to the paddock after the race. When asked about his future, Tsunoda said it was now up to his manager and the teams that still had not decided their lineups if they want to have me or not, but they should. It is a confident message, but it does not change the difficult part of this story. There are not many seats available. The Red Bull route looks especially tough. Verstappen has signed through 2030, removing the senior team opening. Hadjar is expected to remain if he recovers as planned, though Red Bull has not formally announced its 2027 lineup. At Racing Bulls, Lawson has had a strong season. Lindblad has had a promising rookie year. And Nikola Solov is leading Formula 2 and has been called next in line by Racing Bulls team principal Alan Permane. So even though Tsunoda did well in Zandvoort, it would be a big surprise if Red Bull suddenly put him back into one of its regular seats. This one-off race gave him visibility. It did not remove the queue in front of him. That is why Haas is the team people keep talking about. On paper, it makes sense. Haas has one driver, Oliver Behrman, who looks very likely to stay. He is linked to Ferrari long-term, but he is still developing well at Haas and he has scored 18 points this season. His teammate Esteban Ocon has only 3 points. Now let's be fair to Ocon. He is not old. He is 29, which is a normal age for an experienced Formula One driver. The issue is not his age. The issue is that Haas expected more from him, especially compared with Behrman. Team boss Ayao Komatsu has said the team is not in a rush to make its 2027 decision, and that is important. Ocon has time to improve. His seat is not officially open. But Haas is clearly looking at options. The team has tested Ryo Hirakawa and Leonardo Fornaroli privately, and Rafael Kamara is also part of the wider picture. Komatsu said of those test opportunities, "If we had no interest, we wouldn't be doing it." So I would call Tsunoda to Haas a real possibility, not a favourite, not a deal, and definitely not a guarantee. Tsunoda has more than 100 F1 starts, years in the Red Bull system, and showed at Zandvoort that he can adapt without months of preparation. That experience could be useful beside the 21-year-old Bearman. What do you think? If you were Ayao Komatsu, would you choose Tsunoda's experience, a young driver like Fornaroli or Kamara, or the Toyota-linked option of Hirakawa? Let me know, because that choice could decide more than just one seat. The other team people bring up is Aston Martin. This one is more interesting as a theory than as a current transfer story. The Honda connection is obvious. Honda is Aston Martin's works engine partner, and Tsunoda has built much of his career with Honda support. If Aston Martin had an open seat, a Honda-backed Japanese driver would be a natural name to discuss. But there are two big problems. First, there is no confirmed Tsunoda-Aston Martin conversation. None. Second, there may not be a seat. Fernando Alonso has not officially confirmed that he will race in 2027, but the signs point towards him staying. Adrian Newey said Alonso is an amazing driver and that he is pretty confident the relationship will continue. Alonso has said he feels fresh, motivated, and fast. He also said, "I do have a contract, so I'm not moving." That does not lock him in for another season as a race driver, but it tells you where his head is. Aston Martin wants him. Alonso still believes in the team. If he stays, the only other seat would be Lance Stroll's, and that is never a simple conversation because his exact contractual situation is not public and his father owns the team. So Aston Martin is not impossible for Tsunoda. It is just very speculative. It needs a seat to open first, and right now there is no evidence that one will. Tsunoda has also been linked with IndyCar, particularly Meyershank Racing. Motorsport.com reported that he has explored that option. There is no confirmed deal, but it makes sense that his manager would look around. Tsunoda has been clear about one thing. He does not want to sit in a garage for another year. He wants to race. His first choice is Formula 1, but if the F1 door stays closed, he is willing to consider another series. That is sensible. At 26, he should be racing rather than waiting permanently as a reserve. My view is simple. Zandvoort did not guarantee Yuki Tsunoda a 2027 F1 seat, but it made it much harder for teams to say they had forgotten what he can do. He came into an unfamiliar car on a difficult weekend and got within a tenth of a full-time rookie teammate in qualifying before fighting right on the edge of the points. That is a proper statement. Teams do not only see the final position, they also see how quickly a driver learns, whether he keeps the race clean, how he works with engineers, and how close he gets to his teammate. For a driver outside the regular grid, that is valuable. Reserve work can keep a driver fit and informed, but it cannot recreate a full race weekend with changing tyres, traffic, pressure, and real qualifying laps. Tsunoda did not just turn up, he gave teams fresh evidence of his level. Haas is the most realistic team to watch, but it is a crowded battle. Aston Martin is an interesting Honda story, but only if the driver market suddenly opens up. One weekend cannot rewrite an entire career, but one weekend can remind the right people to make a call. And after Zandvoort, Yuki Tsunoda has given them a very good reason to pick up the phone.